Hello, everybody. Welcome to First Time Donor. This is the charity gaming podcast where we talk about all of the wonderful ways you can do good in the world using what you have available to you right now. As always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Monica.
Hey, welcome to another episode. I'm super excited for this one.
As am I, because we are joined by the incredible Alyssa Sweetman, otherwise known as Alykkat. Alyssa is the director of social impact at Twitch, on the board of directors for Women in Games International, is a member of the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and has her own podcast, Influencing Good, which if you're part of our target audience, that's probably something you'd be interested in. So yeah, thank you for joining us, Alyssa.
Yeah, happy to join.
So yeah, Monica, do you want to get us started with a question?
Yeah, I've prepared some questions before and passed them off to Allie, so nothing's a big surprise, but I thought it would be super interesting just to hear from your history and what you've experienced, some of your answers to these. So my first question is, you're currently the director of social impact at Twitch. And how did you first get involved with Twitch and charity streaming and that whole world?
I think this shocks most people's, but all by accident. I was in college and the guy I was dating at the time assumed that being a girl on the internet would make it super easy for me to make money on Twitch. I'd never even heard of Twitch. So when he told me about this, I was like, excuse me, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, I was watching this girl play RuneScape, and he was ecstatic because I guess she made like several $1,000s in an hour. And I have no idea. This was 2015. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't play RuneScape. And the first game I ever actually streamed was Super Mario World. And I just started streaming games. Didn't watch Twitch. And I joined by Twitter. Everyone's like, if you're going to be successful on Twitch, you got to have a Twitter. So I was like, all right, I'll start a Twitter. And then I met a group doing charity stream, and they were doing them by standards today wrong. In the sense that like they were collecting the money themselves, and I was like, man, I was like, how much research have y'all done all this?
That's fraud. That's straight up fraud.
That's actually fraud.
It is. And but at the time there wasn't very many tools. Tiltify was not well socialized.
Right.
And it was okay. This is interesting to me. And they were like, cool, you own it now. And I was like, what? So I didn't own the group, but I owned like all of the charity stuff. And that's when I discovered Tiltify and like really dove into it. So I've been, I wouldn't say ground floor, but at the ground floor at developing what it looks like from a process perspective and a strategy perspective of being really strategic about charity fundraising.
Right.
And that's where I met my old boss, Rum Scout, which is how everyone knows him.
Previous guest on this show.
And our first interaction, like, I was in college. I was like, what, bitch? I was like, why am I talking to you? Like, it was very like being from Texas and looking at the tech industry. It's very weird. And so kept doing that, went on to become a teacher after college. And then I started my own gaming group. When that gaming group fell apart, as one go through cycles I found in all the gaming groups I've been through. And they opened up a role, Drew opened up a role up on his team and invited me to apply. And the whole time I was like, oh, I'm not going to do this. I would not accept a job. I would not move to California. It's so funny. I took one day off from school, and when you're a teacher, they really pressure you not to miss school. So I was really honest about why I was flying out and what I was missing a day for. And funny, the day I came back, I landed at the airport at like 5:00 in the morning, and my sister picked me up and dropped me off at work because we were going on a field trip.
Ooh.
Oh my God.
Longest day of my life.
I believe it.
And, like a week later I heard back and I had an offer. And the whole time I was like, I'm not gonna, but I'm really adventurous and I couldn't not do it once it was there.
I'm so happy you did. And I know I have it on good true record that Ramsco himself did say that one of his most favorite things that he ever did when he was at Twitch was hire you and get you on the team. He's like, I think
Aw.
that was one of the best things that could have happened for charity at Twitch.
We were such a fun team. We would get in these rooms on these whiteboards and dream up these crazy ideas. And we would take photos of the whiteboards. But sometimes, especially really thinking about all of this, Drew and I always dream bigger than
Mhm.
like available resources, I would say. Even now in some of the conversations we have, the ideas are so big.
Mhm. And I think that's perfect, honestly, because then that way you're able to get more charities involved, or you're able to think about like a larger than life picture. What would someone else need to get involved in charity fundraising? Which is perfect and kind of segues really nicely into my next question, because since getting involved in charity streams, has there ever been anything that's really surprised you? Or I guess what has been one of your favorite things that you've learned, or anything of that sort that you've taken away?
I think what surprised me most is size of influencer doesn't really equate to your impact.
Mhm.
There's a popular phrase shared on Twitter by a group from the UK, and their whole thing is impact over numbers.
Mm.
And it's interesting when you talk about charity because you say that about their follow count or maybe viewership doesn't always equate to amount raised, but
Mhm.
the impact that some of these mid-sized or growing creators have, their impact is so massive.
Yeah.
I've
Absolutely.
seen creators with less than 100 followers outraise people with several thousand people watching.
Mhm.
That's amazing. And I feel like that kind of plays into what we realize and what we're all about at Zeldathon too.
Yeah.
Is we're happy if anyone's able to donate any amount. Like, we don't care
Mhm.
about the size of the donation, but it's when you start to see like a 50 donation train of like $5 donations coming in consecutively. Cause
Yeah.
yeah, it's people just being able to want to support a cause in a way that's comfortable for them. And then we always say too, don't over donate. We don't want
Right.
anyone to overspend on donations.
I think that's the really unique part about this too is if you're at the grocery store and you're standing outside and someone is soliciting donations on behalf of a charity or trying to get you to sign up for a run walk, there's this kind of heavy expectation around the entire interaction. Whereas
Mhm.
with an influencer and online, it's so much more celebratory.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even when nonprofit, you're a creator is fundraising for a nonprofit that has a really hard story to hear,
Mhm.
it's really easy to create a celebratory moment versus those really uncomfortable conversations at the grocery store. Sometimes they just do not do a good job
Yeah.
making you feel good about getting involved. Mostly they just make you feel guilty. And I think
Yeah.
that's the real power of influencers, on Twitch and off Twitch is being able to bring folks together to
Mhm.
celebrate what they do.
Yeah.
Absolutely agreed. And I love that you said that too, because not going to say the charity that it was, but I
Oh.
did have one of those moments where I was guilted into like signing up for a monthly donation. And like
Mhm.
it felt like the most impersonal thing. Whereas I love when you're able to donate to someone fundraising for a cause that they believe in on Twitch and they tell you about that cause in a way that they're excited and you understand why they're fundraising. And it's nice
Yeah.
to just hear them tell you how much they appreciate that you're donating or that you're even listening to them talk about that cause.
Right.
Whereas, yeah, it's there's no paper involved too, because I love
Yeah.
love that. That charity that I signed up for will still send me stuff in the mail and still call me and try to convince me to donate to them again. I'm like, are you serious? Leave me be, please.
I mean, that's something we've talked about on this show before, right? Is like the kind of the shift in the mindset of charity fundraising that frankly Twitch was really largely responsible for. Ali, it's like you said, it's a celebration now. Like people can come together and be happy and excited to donate money to charity, whereas in the past, many different organizations and charities and nonprofits, you name it, would, yeah, that their primary method of getting you to give them money was guilting you, and that might work, but it's not gonna have this like incredible side effect that we see on Twitch so often. Like building community and
Hmm.
people like meeting new people and making friends and like there was the stream. I can never remember the name of the person who did this. This was like a good few years ago now. And I wanted to bring this up because we had talked about what was it? What was the phrase? Influence over numbers, or
Impact over numbers.
Impact over numbers. Thank you. I'm still looking at your Twitter bio, and it says influencer fundraising. I'm like, that's the I word. But there was a stream that it was from this channel that had like almost no like real viewers or followers or anything, and they just like started playing Donkey Kong games to raise money for like a trans support group, I think it was, and raised like $300,000 in a day. It was wild. It's one of those things that I still think back on, and I'm like, that's surreal. Like, this person had a wildly successful thing just because the right people saw it and got excited about it and shared it. And obviously that's kind of an outlier, but still it goes to show that, like you said, yeah, that really is, it's not about numbers, it's about how much good you can do.
Yeah. And I think that's a really cool thing too. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Allie.
No, I was just gonna say that one of the other things too is interesting is how it's not even sometimes about the cause, and I know that that's not what charities want to hear. They don't want to hear it's not connected to the work they're doing, but sometimes it's about beating that high score. Sometimes
we feel that
it's about seeing how far you can push it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have donation trains at Zeldathon that we always get very, very hyped about, and we always pop off if they get to like a train of 300. I think our record is a train of 3,000 donations just nonstop.
It was like 2,700, I think. I don't know if someone can correct me on that, they will, but it was in the thousands, like easily.
And like that's the thing too, like you said, it's addicting. Like you just want to beat your own high score and surpass the expectations that you previously have existing for yourself.
Yeah.
But what I was gonna say too about the space that I think is really unique and something that's really cool is I think there's a huge misconception from older generations that our generations, like millennials and Gen Z, don't donate to charities as much or don't support charities that much. But I think it's just because we support them now in ways that they're not used to, like so newer, non-traditional ways.
Right.
And I kind of love that too, because it's more accessible to everyone. Like I've heard about so many charities through Twitch and just various influencers fundraising for those that I never would have encountered normally.
I think too, I'm starting to notice bigger support for B corporations, which are in the United States, a classification of a B corporation is a social good company that's not a nonprofit.
Right.
There's still a for-profit, but a regular corporation has a fiduciary responsibility to investors and shareholders to make the decision that has the biggest financial positive impact on those individuals. Whereas a B corporation, their responsibility is to the mission. So if their mission is reducing plastic, they can make a decision in their business that gives shareholders less money, but is for their mission. And I think we're seeing a lot more of B corporations popping up across the United States. And that is where millennials, Gen Z, and the upcoming Generation Alpha are really going to see most of it go to, because Budweiser, when they did their campaign for when you buy a case of beer, they send a pallet or a caseload of water to some place that doesn't. Like those types of things are a lot more impactful. And we've been seeing that trend pretty heavily since Tom's. I was like in middle school when Tom's came out. And
right.
$150 for a pair of shoes that was burlap basically and awful.
Right.
But then they would send 2 pairs of shoes somewhere else.
Right.
And that was really exciting. And what we're finding is that nonprofits are still in this old format of storytelling. And they're so stuck in the ways of how they're telling this story and what they want their story to represent, that they're not really thinking about what it is that the folks that want to help them need to hear.
Right, right.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that's different about our generations now too, is we like getting involved. And I think that's why we see influencer fundraising taking off and reaching more people. It that does lead me to my next question too, which are there any charities that aren't on Twitch yet, or you wish were more involved and more on board for fundraising through that avenue?
Ooh, call out.
I want to see more charities that were founded by non-white people in this space.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Charity Navigator and GuideStar, the way those programs choose to rate charities is kind of racist. Those systems are
Really?
built around how much money you have and how you do your accounting. Um,
Mm,
I took accounting courses in college because I thought that's what I wanted to do at one point. And accounting
Hmm.
is really just about how you classify costs and what buckets
yeah.
you put them in. So what those programs do
Huh.
to rate charities is they look at their balance sheets and they say, well, it went to this program. And you can what that automatically does is any charity that has a lot of money will more than likely have a better score than a charity that is just starting out or a charity that is started by
Mm,
a person who's not white. And the reason that is because most wealth, particularly in the United States, maybe even the world, I don't feel confident staking a flag in that statement, but is owned by like from imperialism and colonialism, most wealth is owned by white people.
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
And
undoubtedly. Uh-huh.
so what that means is founders of color who get in these rooms with old white people have a
Mm-hmm.
hard time getting money. And when I noticed this really early on when I started going to charity conferences, I would be in rooms with white women, and I'm a white woman, and
Mm,
they would be like, I'm working on this problem. And I would just think, why isn't somebody from your organization who looks like the people they're trying to help here?
mm,
And
Right.
if you go to these conferences, like the bathroom line is one long line of white women. And then there's nothing wrong with that, but we're not on the balance really helping people who know how to solve these problems.
Right.
Like I don't know every nuance there is in every community. And while I can support those missions, a lot of those times those nonprofits that really know how to do so don't get necessary support and funding. And I want to plug
absolutely.
Huh.
something right here.
Please
Oh.
There's
do.
there's a directory put together called Give Black with no
Hmm.
A, giveblack.org, maybe.com. And it's just a directory of nonprofits founded by Black people.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
Nice.
you can sort by state, you can sort by cause. And I think that that's really cool
Yeah.
because when we think to like solve problems, we immediately think to give to the names we can think of rather than doing the research. And when
Right.
we go to give a new charity, we're really stingy with our money. We're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, how much are they paying their employees and this and that? And at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. If you're not paying your
It's true.
employees
Yeah.
well, then you're going to get that quality or level of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that actually was a to steal Monica's little line here, a great segue into my next question. Um,
Go for it.
speaking of plugging useful resources, I want to plug your pinned tweet right now, Allie. I think you made this like over a year ago, but it's still like a very relevant source of information, and I definitely want to talk about this a little bit. Your Twitter, by the way, is at Alykkat, spelled KKAT, and it is at the time of recording this, still your pinned tweet. But there's a lot in here that it kind of feels like you wanted to talk more about, especially in the realm of choosing your charity to raise for. If you're gonna basically, yeah, right, sorry, the tweet is essentially about so you want to be a charity streamer, here's what to get started on. And you talk a lot about what charity you choose, and I think that's something that a lot of people, especially those who are just getting started in doing something like this, they all kind of tend to lean towards the ones that everyone knows. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. These are still charities that are doing incredible work all over the world in a lot of cases. But, with the kind of the big two that I tend to think of being like St. Jude and Direct Relief. Again, both phenomenal organizations. But I think there is definitely oftentimes cases to be made where a person might feel more passionate about another subject, maybe want to support a smaller charity that focuses on a more particular area of giving, and things like that. And that's Yeah, that's kind of something I wanted to ask you about. Like, where do you think someone should get started when thinking about this? Even if this, whatever you suggest, ends up leading them back to things like, St. Jude or Direct Relief. Anyways.
I think they should start with something that's super close to their heart.
Mm-hmm.
I think, particularly as an influencer, you are. So I know that folks don't like being called an influencer. And the way I would describe the
Right.
difference between a content creator and an influencer is a content creator is someone who just creates the content. You
Right.
later become an influence when you grow an audience and have the ability to influence your audience.
Yes.
And I think that when an influencer is picking something, they should really start with something that's near and dear to their heart, especially for their first charity project, because
Of course.
it's really hard to talk about something you're not passionate about. Like,
Yeah.
I can talk all day long about some things, and other things I struggle to come up with more than 10 words. And if you apply that to charity streaming, how you talk about your mission, how you talk about these things being important to you, all will impact your ability to be an effective fundraiser. And I think that that's why you see larger influencers and mid-size influencers fundraising similar amounts is it's all in their effective storytelling. And that's a
Right.
skill that takes lots of practice. And so I don't think it's just as simple as pick what you love. You have to really decide what about this nonprofit is important to you.
Right.
So for
Love
me,
that.
before I worked at Twitch, I fundraised for this nonprofit that it wasn't necessarily near and dear to my heart and something that I experienced, but it's called Yellow Boat of Hope.
Hmm.
And it's this nonprofit. It's a nonprofit in the US, but
Right.
it works in the Philippines. And the Philippines is a bunch of islands. And there's not a school on every island. So the kids have to go to a different island most days to go to school. And not all of the Philippines is developed. It's like China. It's like China in the sense there's really developed areas and really underdeveloped areas. And in the underdeveloped areas, it actually costs money for the kids to go from one island to another.
Right.
And so if your family can't afford for that, then you might swim or walk across and then your clothes are wet. And then the school, like if you have a lunch, you may or may not be able to get your lunch to school if you had one. So what Yellow Boat of Hope is it's like a bus, but a boat, and it's yellow. And then
I love that.
and it costs like $2,000 to make a boat and supply a school with lunches. And to me, education. So my degree is in economics, and the two things I took away from that is the two things that are important for any society to thrive. The first one is physical infrastructure, and the second one is education.
Right.
After you have those two things, everything else is possible. And I was also a teacher at the time, and education is just so important for confidence and so many things. And so it was really near and dear to my heart. And even though I have an emote of me crying, it's from that one where I was talking about how hurt it was, but I didn't have donations because it was really hard, even though the story and how close it was to me. We didn't raise a lot of money. I don't think we funded a whole boat. And that's because people in chat were like, this is a really cool mission, but I don't feel compelled to support this. Because that's not something they can relate to. It's really hard to relate to some things.
That's true. Yeah.
That's the second lens I would say is something that's really near and dear to your heart, and how easy is it for someone to relate to the problem.
Right. That can be important too, and that's not really something I had honestly even really considered until you brought it up. Because a lot of the times I'm reminded of your description of that kind of reminded me of things like Charity Water, right? Where they have very monetized goals, much like the Yellow Boat. It's like $2,000 or something to get a boat, to fund the boat, to get the boat to the Philippines, whatever. And Charity Water is kind of the same way in the sense that it's, I forget exactly how much it is at this point, but
for a well, 10,000.
It's 10,000 for a well. Yeah,
your girl remembers.
we raised for them relatively recently, so good on you. That's my bad. But yeah, they have a same kind of goal there as well, and I think that can be a thing that really encourages people to donate too, because especially kind of like higher end donors, right? Like, of course, as we've said before, a donation of any amount matters, and especially if you're not, you don't have a lot of money to donate, it is worth looking into the specifics of each, organization that you're considering donating to, maybe, and seeing which could, leverage your money the best. I'm thinking of the direct relief line where it's something like for each dollar you donate, it's like $42 or something in medical supplies, like worth. That might be wrong. It's been a minute since I last read that. Please do the research yourself, and of course it may have changed. But I think that can be a thing that really encourages people to donate, because like I said, even like especially the big ones, the ones who are like, I have a lot of money to throw at a charity. I think it can be a lot more encouraging for people to look at that and say, oh, it's $2,000 and I can fund the whole boat. Just that straight up. I can make the whole boat. I can send the boat to the Philippines. Absolutely.
I can make the magic school bus boat.
Literally, yes. Like it's you can do that, and that can be exciting, and that can be another really powerful incentive too for, like I said, big donors, but also small ones. Like let's come together as a community and put $2,000 into this project. So I like that. That's important, I think.
I think,
Effective.
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it too, because as an influencer, like even though you're fundraising for something, you are still doing a philanthropic act, because you're
Right.
putting in the time, like you're putting the time of researching that organization, which I think is a form of philanthropy, just donating your time. And then you're also donating your expertise through having a stream and accessing your community and hyping up that charity for them and sharing their story.
Right.
That sort of does lead me to my next question, because no, I know it's my go-to tagline, but
this is scripted. This is
yeah. Like I know AJ mentioned Charity Water, and Charity Water, there's Anthony who's working there, and he's a fantastic sort of community outreach manager role like that. I know not a lot of charities do have those, but over the past year and a half, have you seen more charities kind of looking and hiring roles like that, just because maybe they're recognizing that it's more helpful to do outreach and potentially reach new audiences through avenues like
Hmm.
Twitch, Facebook fundraising? I know TikTok even has fundraising on it now.
Right.
Yeah. I actually advocate and have been for years strongly, every charity I come in encounter with, that there needs, even if they hire within, they need a singular dedicated person to their influencer fundraising programs.
Oh,
And
for
that's
sure.
every nonprofit that has listened and had a singular person own it versus like a group of people that bounce around and uses their ability to build relationships as a human to another human is infinitely more successful than
Right.
those that try to take a super corporate approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I am seeing that a lot more. Charity in Australia reached out to let me know they were going to be hiring an influencer fundraising manager. Uh,
Ooh.
I get, and they reached out like I want to say towards the end of last year to just get an overview of what it's like, and
Right.
then it's more and more, and we're seeing it become a very solid option. So if you have, experience with influencer relations and you have interest in nonprofits, I'm always open to having conversations with folks that are trying to get into it. Helped a few folks become contractors before. I think it's
Wow.
super, super powerful to, and I also think this is a great way. The one thing that I will say is that they I'm not seeing a lot of diversity hiring around that area.
Right.
Gaming, so it tends to be like a singular demographic pretty consistently when hiring. So I am hoping over
Yeah,
time that changes.
for sure.
Yeah, I know. Like, just in my own perspective, this year was the first time I did a solo fundraising campaign for St. Jude, and it was incredibly easy because I know they have a team of people on that, making it super easy for goobers like me to figure out how to have some sort of an overlay, how to like plug in a donation bar. And I know not all charities have that, so I absolutely agree with you that it makes a huge difference just having that level of support for influencers or someone who's interested in fundraising on their behalf. Okay, I have another question. For gamers and people in this community, being online is definitely nothing new. But after the past year, do you think we'll start seeing more charities getting comfortable using platforms like Twitch and TikTok to raise awareness around who they are and their causes?
I think some can. I think it's harder. One of the things that nonprofits really want to start at the beginning is they want to pick a random employee and put them on a camera with Fortnite or another popular game.
Right.
And I mean, that's cool, but is your employee a professional entertainer?
Right. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and how do they balance like playing the game and being an entertainer with talking about your mission? So we do see some. I think the biggest there's two main categories in my mind. The first one is animal-based nonprofits.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
team is working on connecting with zoos and sanctuaries and shelters to get them streaming on Twitch. I think that does really good. You can look at Marine Mammal Rescue, which is a not for profit, and
Hmm.
they just have a camera on their otters and people eat it up. And so I think animals is a super easy one.
Oh,
Mhm.
for sure.
Super
Your
easy. I
entertainers
think,
are just like it's free entertainment.
And
and
the cause
then
speaks for itself too with animals. Honors.
yes. And animal nonprofits that do conservation efforts can talk about those efforts in scheduled content blocks so they can bring on like I think back to the turtle with the straw in its nose is the most famous animal video probably ever.
Yeah.
Right.
And if they had been live streaming on Twitch, not necessarily that through a process, but maybe like, here's the footage of when we first found this turtle, and this is what the turtle looks like now. Let's talk about that process in a live setting
Yeah.
Mhm.
is really great. And I think the other one that is going to be really far lagging behind, but research. People
Yeah,
love
Mm,
watching science experiments.
true.
And
absolutely.
and so I do think that there is a place where some experiments or tests or science conversations could be really exciting. I recall there was a brain transplant when I
Whoa.
was in high school. Man, now it's going to bother me that I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was some insane transplant being done for the first time ever, and they live streamed the surgery.
Oh my
And,
god.
Wow.
and I don't even know if Twitch was around when this happened, but it was incredible and weird, and everyone wanted to know. And I think science and animals are really easy. The ones that I think are going to
Right.
be really hard are the ones it's really hard to stream if you're tackling things with domestic violence or hunger. I think
Right.
you can do cooking shows, but
Sure.
with
Yeah.
homelessness or education, those can be harder
Yeah.
because you don't
Yeah.
want to parade the people that you're helping out
Of
for
course.
donations. That's not a good practice. So I think it would just be a balance in the programming that they come up with. So I don't think that all content makes sense for charities to create, but I do
Sure.
think there are some big gaps that charities are just maybe it's
Sleeping on.
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
They're sleeping on it.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I've been loving all the animal channels popping up that I'm seeing because
Oh, they're so
Toronto,
good.
yeah, Toronto Zoo is right by my house. So I got to see it in person a bunch of times. And I never really thought of a zoo as a nonprofit, actually, until I heard that you were doing outreach and looking to connect with people who worked at zoos just to get them onboarded and get them familiar with the space.
Right.
And yeah, I mentioned that to AJ too. And like, I remember him popping off in a previous episode, finding out that Toronto Zoo has a Twitch channel now.
Yeah. It's so. That's so
Fun
cool.
fact,
Mm.
there are 10,000 zoos worldwide.
Oh.
Nearly almost all of them are private foundations or nonprofits,
Right.
and 2,400 of them are in the United States alone.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Oh my
And
gosh.
not aquariums are not classified as zoos in every location. So
Sure.
it'll be
Mhm.
like a zoo and aquarium, and that's when the aquarium will get counted. So it doesn't account aquariums or sanctuaries or conservation places. So there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
remember it wasn't quite an aquarium. I went like it was a hybrid history museum and aquarium. It was the Jacques Cousteau Museum in Nice,
Hmm.
France, and like I would love to watch just footage of fish swimming around in an aquarium. That would be the most relaxing stream to
French
have on in the
fish.
background while I'm working.
Yes.
And then I absolutely agree with you in seeing gaps too, because I think one huge missed opportunity is I come from an arts background, and I know that
Mhm.
orchestras and music ensembles like that are technically nonprofits.
Right.
And for some reason, like none of them ever live stream their performances. They seem like very, I guess, unenthused or uninterested in getting involved in live streaming. And I think they really should be thinking about, I don't know, diversifying their avenues and who they
Right.
can who they can reach.
Especially music. You know, like you'd think that's such a I don't want to call it a low-hanging fruit, but it seems like if you're going to stream anything, you'd come to music before you'd come to like, the otter exhibit at the Toronto Zoo, which is incredible, but like, it's such a and as someone who has like an AV background, I understand that a lot of the times trying to cram like an entire, orchestra into a live stream can be a bit of an audio nightmare, but nonetheless, it's totally doable and really seems like something that could not only sustain itself, like since, like you said, a lot of them are technically nonprofits, which is also something I didn't really know until recently. Um, so it's a way for arts like that to kind of sustain themselves as well as like, maybe start doing some good in the world, like whatever you want to do.
I just need to make them watch us throw together Jam Train.
Oh my God. That's kind of what was on my mind when I said that.
Okay, so Ali, another question for you. What's one piece of advice that you would give to any influencer wanting to get more involved with doing good on their platform?
Hmm.
Don't overthink it.
I
Hmm.
like that.
I see a lot of folks like really thinking, and it needs to be this and it needs to be that.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of different ways to get involved. It doesn't always have to be fundraising. Sometimes it can just be having an honest conversation. I read an
Right.
article not that long ago that talked about what it's like to be an influencer in 2021, and it was shortly after what was going on with in Israel and the Gaza Strip, and
Hmm.
it talked
Right.
about how as an influencer you're going to be asked to speak on all of these topics and you're not really
This
an
is true.
expert.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of folks will easily pull back and just be like, oh, it's politics, because that's an easy one liner that we've accepted
Yeah.
in society to avoid talking about things.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
influencers will need to figure out like what their brand is, what they're going to speak on. I think
Yeah.
folks need to get really comfortable with saying, hey, I actually don't feel qualified to speak on this. I don't understand enough
Right.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just all comes down to like, don't overthink it.
Yeah.
And I think just a sense of earnesty and honesty, and people feel that when you're not overthinking it. Like they can see that you're being more genuine and truthful with
Right.
them rather than talking out of your butt and just making things up.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you see that a lot too, right? Like, it's like you said, on paper, saying, oh, I'm actually not qualified to really, or I'm not really like educated enough in this topic to really speak on it at this level. I encourage you to do your own research though, is like, on paper, that seems like a really easy thing to say, right? To just be like, oh, IDK. Like, that's kind of like what it boils down to, really. But so many people, I think, do surprisingly find that very difficult. Like everyone kind of like has an opinion, about just about everything. And the to say like, well, like you said, Monica, instead of just kind of like talking out of your butt and being like, I read a tweet about like how this is happening and that's source, dude, just trust me. Like it's easy for people to do that, especially people who call themselves influencers or who we would classify influencers, because it's like in their job title. It's something that they might think, oh, I feel pressured to speak about this because it's my job. So I like that advice a lot because I think it really does all boil down to, like you said, just don't don't overthink it. If you don't know, say you don't know. Like, just kind
Yeah.
of own up to it.
Yeah, um we really uphold this idea that we have to individually have all the answers. And I think
Right.
there is at least for me, I often see my need to have an answer or need to control or my have a perceived sense of control because the
Mm-hmm.
world is so big, the problems are so big, and
Right.
having opinions, informed or uninformed, like gives us something to anchor to, just like
Hmm.
religion and other things. And so I think it's really easy for folks to be like, this is my opinion and this is my thought without really diving deep.
Right.
And, these issues are complicated, a lot
Yeah.
of them, and
Yeah. Yeah.
overthinking it or trying to have a simplified opinion versus saying, like, I encourage you to do your own research. I'll go do mine. I'm not going to speak on this because I'm not an expert. I think is a
Right.
really safe thing for folks to say.
It is, and it comes off a whole lot better too than just like, ew, politics. We don't talk about that here. You know.
Or the
Psycho
other route of just giving up a politician answer where you do a lot of talking and there's not really any concrete answer for
Right.
people.
Right. Well, what
Well,
you're really asking.
yeah, what's interesting is that even though like everyone defaults to these types of answers, psychologically, people trust you more when you admit to things you don't know.
This
So it
is
Mhm.
actually
true. Yeah.
works in an influencer's favor
Mm-hmm.
to admit what they do and don't know because when they talk about something passionately, they're more likely to be believed and have that sense of trust with their viewers
Mhm.
Yeah.
or
That
audience.
makes sense.
I'm reminded back to my own teaching days where every now and then a student would ask me a question and like I mean you could do the thing where you give them a gag answer, but like where
Right.
where does that get you? How does that help anyone? So I would always like
Right.
used to say to them, I am not sure the answer on that, but I will look it up and I will learn the answer. And once I learned what that is, I will share it with you so you can learn as well. And yeah, I think just that earnesty and honesty of not wanting to waste anyone's time with false answers or facts that you're not sure of.
Right. I like the analogy of kind of comparing, let's say a Twitch streamer, um, to a teacher, because there are a lot of similarities. There are things that when if a teacher or someone, especially when you're younger, like tells you something, you just kind of believe it because it's like, well, yeah, it's their job to impart knowledge. It's mine to absorb said knowledge. A lot of the times, I think Twitch can function the same way, or Twitch, or like YouTube, Facebook, whatever. Pretty much any social media. Like, let's be honest. Um, you can just kind of make a tweet about something and you could change someone's mind on an opinion, so like, or on a subject, or an issue, anything like that. And it's you have like real power, so to just kind of talk out of your butt about something that you're not. I'm sorry, I love it. I gotta keep saying it. About a topic that you're not an expert in, or are really in general qualified to speak on, is important. I like that.
Hmm. Every my admission is every single time we're raising for a new charity that I'm unfamiliar with through
Hmm.
Zeldathon, I always go to their website and do a bunch of
Right.
reading because I know that's part of our duty. And what we're doing is we're teaching our community about these charities that we're fundraising for. And
Right.
like you said as well, we're sharing their mission and trying to get people excited about the good that these charities are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I know we were talking about like the best advice for
Mhm.
influencers, but the best advice for charities is simplify your story.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like just that comment, I go and do a bunch of reading. How like it the basic stuff your nonprofit does should be easy to conceptualize in 3 sentences or less.
Right.
Right.
An
Have like
elevator
your.
pitch.
I was just gonna say that.
I work my day job is involved in getting nonprofits used to approaching sponsors and just sponsorship stuff. So
Hmm.
just seeing how many of them want to give like a 3-pager description about their nonprofit to the person that they're trying to get for funds, and like that person just gets overwhelmed and confused. And I think it's the same for an influencer as well, especially when you're playing a game, you're
Right.
trying to keep that hype, you're reading your chat and communicating with your audience.
A lot of multitasking.
Yeah, it's just too much. I think I absolutely agree with that as well.
My thing is you don't need the influencer doesn't need to know every single program you have. What's the key programs?
True.
And admittedly, I am not short-winded at all. So when I
I
write
feel that.
documents, I usually write way more than I need to. And then I go
Hmm.
back and I go, what is unnecessary? What is
Mm.
context that I need to figure out how to work into other sentences?
Right.
And it's a skill. Being able to
Hmm.
summarize something in just a few sentences, but have this crazy amount of information behind it is such an incredible skill.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
I think, and I think a lot of us too are kind of taught. This is a bit of a sidetrack here, but I think a lot of us are kind of taught, especially growing up through like elementary school, primary school, whatever you call it, and like high school and stuff. That like it's more of a skill to write long, because you're like, oh well, I need
I
to
was
meet
just
page
talking about
requirements.
this.
Yeah, and suddenly later in life, you're like, oh wait, now because I have this issue a lot too, and I'm realizing it recently. Is like I like when asked to give like an elevator pitch on something, I just blank because like all I'm hit with like information overload, and I'm like, what do I prioritize here? I don't know.
I have a theory on this. I think it's because it feels like every single year that I get older, it feels like time just starts to go faster.
Mm,
So then, like when you're a kid, you feel like you have all the time in the world, so you write the long stories and the long stuff. And then
sure.
suddenly you're an adult and you're like, oh man, no one has time to read all this.
Yeah.
I I blame school. They're like, "Where's your
Yeah.
adjectives? How flowery is this language?" And you
Right.
need to and then in college, you don't really write business papers. And I'm like,
No.
"Sure, let's
Yeah.
absolutely dive into this stuff, but how
Right.
about you make us write it in a way that's going to be useful later?"
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Because even like that's such a huge time sink, I think, that I wasn't expecting when I got to be an adult, like how much time I
Hmm.
spend writing things because documents are like the most effective way to communicate across time zones and very busy people. And when I first started writing, poor Drew is such an excellent writer. And I would have him read stuff and he'd be like, "What are you trying to say?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? I wrote 2 pages." And he would be like,
Yeah.
"I don't understand what you're saying." And it's because it's just a skill that is not taught, but we're
No.
expected to know when we
Hmm.
graduate college. But at no point
Right.
in time do we practice this.
Yeah.
Yeah. My boss will
I,
like frequently cut me off if I'm ever explaining something that's I'm taking way too long to explain, and he'll be like, "Hey, I'm not like listen, get like 3 sentences or less, man." I'm like, "All right, fair point. Let me try
Aw.
again."
I've come to the end of my questions. So
Yeah,
if there's
likewise.
anyone who has any questions for Allie, ones that she's allowed to answer, granted, we have to keep that in
Right.
mind. Feel free to ask and we can read through those. And AJ, do you still have any more questions?
That honestly pretty much answered everything I wanted to talk about. I had more, but eventually we kind of got into all of it. So
We found
I'll
ourselves in a
take
nice
it.
mind meld rhythm.
We do. Same brain.
Thank you so much, Ali, just for taking the time to let us interview you and let some more people know about what you do
Hmm.
and your experiences that you've had. Because honestly, it's incredible. And I've gotten to learn so much just through this conversation. So thank you
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. I always love talking about this stuff. We could go on for days. My poor partner.
I mean, you do. You have your own show, don't you? Like,
Yeah, I do actually go on for days about this stuff.
good. It's a good topic to go on for days about.
My friend Darius is actually watching. He's super cool. He's a registered nurse and he wants to know if you have any tips for choosing a good nonprofit to donate to.
I think that's a hard one. Everyone, like I said earlier in the show, wants to lead on Charity Navigator or Guide Star.
Right.
And when I think of good, what I think about is, do they have any impact reports on their website? And a lot of
Right.
nonprofits don't. And
Hmm.
that's
Oh,
creating reports is actually really time consuming, especially for it to communicate effectively. So I don't ever hold it against a
Right.
nonprofit that doesn't. But if it's a smaller nonprofit that's local, I may email and ask.
Right.
If it's a larger nonprofit that's been around for a long time and you can't find any impact reports on their website, I'm not saying that's indicative of anything because I can't be certain.
Right.
But if they've been around for a long time and they've had a lot of funding and you can't find an impact report easily on their website,
Mm,
Yeah.
it might be really hard to understand the impact they're actually having.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think this is maybe a controversial take, but ask yourself if the problem they're solving, one, needs to be solved, and
Right.
two, do you believe the way they're solving it is effective?
That's
And I think
that's a big one.
And I
yeah.
think that's really hard because you may not have the answers. But sometimes when you look at a nonprofit and they're like, I'm solving this problem, you're like, okay. And then you look at their programs and you're like, I don't understand how these programs map to this problem. I think that that's a really
Yeah.
good indicator of how organized a nonprofit can be. And I say this because it's really easy to become a nonprofit. In the United States, the
Right.
cheapest state is Texas.
Yeah.
So you get incorporated in Texas for $25 and then you mail off, I think it's like between $400 and $800 with the IRS. So for less than $1,000, you become a nationally registered nonprofit,
Oh,
which is
wow.
pretty affordable.
Yeah.
So
all
it's
things
it's
considered.
totally fair to ask these questions.
Mhm.
That's the way I would approach it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too, because yeah, if you're a nonprofit and you're serving a community and you're able to accomplish and do good things, wouldn't you want to share that as well? So absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. And I do understand that data sometimes can be very like you kind of hinted at, Ellie, it can be very time consuming to create, especially in a way that's readable. You know, it's one thing if you have your, you know, if you have like your somebody who works on like the technical side of your charity be like, hey, you know, show us the records for this or show us the data on this, and they show you like the raw data, and a normal person would look at that and have no idea what they're looking at. So I do understand, and I empathize with that, like that it's hard to come up with that sometimes in a way that's readable and user friendly, but still very important. I do want to agree with that as well.
Yeah, I sometimes folks on Twitter want to have a rigorous discourse around nonprofits like tax papers
Right.
and or like reporting, and I just do not get involved in those conversations because it's really easy to read what you want to read in any of those documents.
Right.
Mhm.
And if you're not a tax professional, you really don't know what you're looking at. And if you're not a forensic accountant, you're not going to know what their accounting paper says either.
True.
So I tend to like avoid going to that and stick more around, do you align with their mission?
Right.
Does the problem need to be
Mhm.
solved, and are they solving it in a way that makes sense to you?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think that's a fantastic takeaway.
Some good rules of thumb there.
So I think that brings us all to the end of our questions. So I'm going to start wrapping us up and just want to remind everyone that it's never too late to become a first time donor, an important message to take away from our podcast. And just if you're listening to our podcast, drop us a review, drop us a rating, say hi, give us a wonderful, warm, glowing review. I wanted to say thank you again so much, Ali, for taking the time out of your day just to come sit with us and let us pick your brain about a bunch of nonprofit, charity, Twitch related things. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
one
Thanks for
person,
having me. Sorry.
it's been great. And one person that I've continuously forgotten to thank, and I've been kicking myself when I've been listening back to some of our episodes, is I want to thank Danny Music for the amazing music that he wrote for
Yes.
our intro and outro.
It's so
And
good.
yes, I'm popping off about it. He composed it completely, let us use it, and thank you so much, Danny Music.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone watching. I hope you've learned as much as I have through this episode and you've gotten some fantastic takeaways. And yeah, once more, never too late to become a first time donor.
Thanks for listening.